Moonlight drags long shadows through the cypress and the porches of the Old South, where stories refuse to settle and the land keeps its grudges. Across swamps and coastal dunes, in the hush of small towns and the boards of abandoned inns, 12 tales endure, each born of a specific wound and kept alive by the people who still pass it on. If you're staying with this, like and subscribe to hear them all. There's one for almost every moonlit road here. 1. The Lantern of Bayou Lure, Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. In the late 1800s, small skiffs threaded the bayou to reach distant sugarcane lots and scattered cabins. Boatmen carried oil lanterns that swung like second hearts in the dark. The tale says a ferryman vanished one stormy night while trying to guide a widow and her child across a swollen channel. His lamp was later found wedged on a root, still warm. Town records name a lost crossing and list no grave. The ferryman's family moved away within months. Today, boaters claim a light appears where no path exists, bobbing over open water and drawing the curious toward the reeds. Those who follow say the lantern does not show a safe route, only a pale, steady glow and then a cold that bites through boots. Locals warn, do not chase a light at bayou's edge. The lantern is said to keep calling. SFX Distant Owl. 2. The Woman on the Bluff, Savannah, Georgia. At the turn of the century, a young woman in a white dress was spoken about in neighborhood whispers. She kept to the bluff that looks over the river, watching for a sailor who never returned. Folklore holds that on a fog-soaked evening, she walked the path and disappeared into the mist. Friends placed flowers where she was last seen. The official notice in town papers was brief and unadorned. A name, an age, a note of sorrow. Now, people who pass the bluff at dawn report a figure at the railing in an old-fashioned gown, turned toward the water. Drivers slow, headlights catching the pale fabric as she fades before any approach. She's waiting, one resident said quietly. You feel the river hush around you. The bluff keeps her vigil. SFX Wind Through Grass. 3. Chains at Iron Hollow Mill, Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. Iron Hollow Mill ground and melted metal for railroad spikes in the 1890s, drawing families and laborers to its long shed of iron and brick. An industrial accident closed a shift in smoke and sirens. Some workers died that night, and a younger man survived with silence in his eyes. The company ledger shows abrupt layoffs and an insurance settlement, but little public mourning. Today, night walkers near the old foundation speak of the sound of chains dragging across stone and the metallic clink of something being reset. Amateur photographers sometimes capture strange blurs near the mill's broken sluice gates or a handprint on a rusted girder that no one can explain. Guides advise passing on the far side of the road and say the mill's echoes still carry the weight of labor that never quite rested. The chains are said to remember. 4. The Soldier on Folly Hill, Charleston, South Carolina. During a summer of bullets and fever, a makeshift hospital occupied a hill where the infirm lined up on straw and boards. A young Confederate soldier, noted in a surgeon's ledger for his blue jacket and quiet prayers, died alone when the fighting reached the town's edge. There was a simple burial beyond the hedge and an inscription that weathered away. Modern visitors to Folly Hill report a soldier in period coat who watches the bay, sometimes visible on fog-heavy mornings. Photographs taken from the hill at dusk occasionally show a shadowed figure leaning on a cane that was never there in daylight. Park rangers give the story to visitors with respectful distance, and some leave small flags or coins at the low stone. The soldier is said to still stand guard. Sound effects: distant bugle. 5. The Crossroads Jailhouse, Natchez County, Mississippi. In the late 19th century, a jailhouse at a rural crossroads held those accused of petty and grave crimes alike. One winter, a lynch mob's fury broke a town and a wooden cell. The record notes arrests and a subsequent hush that settled over the courthouse. Official files list names but little else, and families carried the grief in private. Locals now say that on certain nights, the jailhouse door, the iron latch long since removed, slams from the inside, and footsteps pace the small yard. Visitors who approach report a pressure at the ribs, as if the air tightens. Guides say the spot calls up the town's worst hours and that the ground there holds stories the records never told. The padlocked gate is still silent, but something within keeps pacing. Sound effects. Footsteps. 6. The Singing Woman of Perdido Key, Escambia County, Florida. Shipwrecks and shoreline tragedies made this stretch of sand a place of whispered navigation rules. In the early 1800s, a woman was said to wander the dunes after a schooner went down. Some accounts name her as a survivor who never settled inland. Others suggest she sought a lost child. Community logs refer to a rescue attempt that night and to a single lantern found on the beach. Today, fishermen and nocturnal beachwalkers describe a voice, soft, melodic, rising from the dunes on windless nights, singing a lullaby that slows the heart. Binoculars sometimes find a lone silhouette moving along the high tide line, then dissolving into salt spray. You don't go alone on those sands when the singing starts, a local boater advised. The song is said to linger above the surf. Eerie ambient. 7. The Gardener at Magnolia Place, St. James Parish, Louisiana. Magnolia Place was a long house with a walled garden that ran down to a drainage ditch. In the 1870s, its keeper was remembered as a man who tended rows and taught children to plant. Oral histories name him as beloved by neighbors, and a small newspaper notice marks his passing after an illness. Over generations, the estate changed hands and once fell into neglect. Recent caretakers report gloves pulled from the tool shed in the morning, footprints in tilled soil where no one walked, and the scent of rosemary in rooms long empty. Descendants who visit say they feel an invisible hand guiding them to plant in certain beds. The gardener is said to keep caring for the roots. SFX. Trowel in soil. 9. The Lighthouse Keeper of Pensacola Point, Escambia County, Florida. A keeper manned a narrow tower in the late 1800s, cutting a solitary figure against storms and moonlight, his log noting nights of fog and the slow blink of the light. A fire burned in a neighboring boathouse one season, and the keeper's duty pulled him out into a black night. Records show a missing watch and a later notation of a man declared lost at sea. The tower continued to operate with gaps in its logbooks. Present-day night drives along the point yield reports of a lantern switching on and off where no bulb remains, and of the keeper's silhouette moving across the catwalk before the concrete was restored. Fishermen report compass malfunctions nearby, and a retired Coast Guard member once admitted to turning his patrol away from the point after seeing a figure in oil-stained coat. The keeper is said to check the light still. SFX. Trowel in soil. 9. The Tolman Stone Bridge, Dahlonega County, Georgia. A single-arched stone bridge once collected the coins of traders and stagecoaches in the mid-1800s. A tollman kept accounts in a ledger and was noted for his steady manner. A flood and a late winter frost combined to close a season, and, according to the ledger, the tollman failed to make his rounds. The bridge survived, and the road bent around it. The ledger's last line is a single underscored entry. Today, drivers report a phantom lantern drifting along the lane and the impression of being watched from the bridge's parapet. Hitchhikers and night travelers claim to feel a small coin press into their hand, warmth fading into cold. That bridge takes its toll in other ways, a trucker murmured. The stone still holds its balance. SFX. Creaking wood. 10. The Children of Willow's End, Baldwin County, Alabama.
An epidemic swept the town in the early 1900s, and a small field outside Willow's End became a burial ground for those children whom the town could not save. Town records record dates and the scant names of families who left thereafter. Memory in the town is tender. Mothers light candles at a small iron fence on certain anniversaries. Walkers at dusk sometimes hear the laughter of children on the wind, impossible and bright where none play. Photographs taken of the fenced plot on misty mornings occasionally show tiny handprints on the glass of an old fence post, marks that vanish when searched.
Locals hold the site with quiet reverence and do not play there after sundown. The children are set to still run in that field. Sound effects, soft child laugh. 11. The Judge's Balcony, Charleston, South Carolina. A 19th-century courthouse balcony leaned over a square where verdicts and oaths once echoed. A judge, noted in legal minutes for stern rulings and an uncompromising eye, presided over cases in a season when justice and prejudice sometimes met. An obituary lists the judge's death as sudden. A few local letters hint at guilt that troubled him late in life. These days, evening visitors to the square report a shadow on the balcony, pacing and rubbing his hands as if counting invisible evidence. Occasional gusts send papers spinning in the press room beneath, though the archives insist the room is sealed. "He can't let it go," a librarian said softly. The balcony still watches the square. Music low-chored. 12. The Iron Pillar of Old Carver Road, Hinds County, Mississippi. A rail siding and a freight crossing once clattered along Old Carver Road, where a pillar of iron marked a spot of transit and life. A wagon collided with an oncoming freight in a fog some decades past. Municipal logs list injuries and the disruption of schedules, and a stone marker replaced wrecked timber. Walkers on the lane report a cold that collects around the iron pillar and a whispering like dry paper in windless weather. Nighttime photos sometimes show a smear of light at pillar height, a human outline that fades with the sunrise. Farmers avoid laying harvests next to the marker, saying the soil there is restless. The pillar still hums with movement that no one returns to explain. Sound effects, distant rail. Across these counties and parishes, the pattern recurs. A specific hurt, a quiet official record, and then the way people keep remembering. These stories do not assert proof. They catalog the human way of laying meaning over loss. They are carried by guides, family lore, and the photographs that sometimes refuse to explain themselves. They are told with empathy for those who suffered and caution toward the living who might seek them out. If these tales held your attention, please like, subscribe, and share a story in the comments. Tell us which of these sites you want explored next, or what your own town whispers after dark. 13. The Lantern of Brackett's Crossing, Prince Edward County, Virginia. A low wooden trestle spans the creek where stagecoaches once stalled and farmers forded their horses. The crossing earned its name from a brakeman who kept a kerosene lamp lit through fog and frost. His ledger entries were neat, his nerves plain in the slanted ink. One winter night, a freight overturned in the bend, and the brakeman did not return home. The crossing remained in use until iron bridges rerouted the road. The lamppost, stripped of glass and paint, stands still. Travelers after dusk speak of a small, stubborn light hovering where the tracks once joined, never ahead long enough to show the path, never close enough to warm a hand. Fishermen tie off their boats a respectful distance away. "It holds to its watch," an old railman said. The lamp keeps looking over the water. 14. The Miller's Well, Preble County, Ohio. Behind a clapboard mill long since shuttered, a stone well sank into the meadow. The miller, records show, kept accounts and a careful ledger of grain and tolls. The well was where he spoke to his wife before dawn, where children paused to drop a pebble in place of luck. An autumn of fever took the miller and his apprentice.
The mill stood empty and later collapsed into timbers and rust, but the well remained stubborn, its rim black with moss. Hikers who pass describe a breath of cold air rising from the hold on summer afternoons, and the soft sound of someone singing a nursery rhyme not sung in a century. Cameras trained at the stone on foggy mornings sometimes catch a pale face peering from dark water that resolves into a ripple if anyone approaches. The well still wants to be heard. Music, singing distant. 15. The Blue Coat at Portsmouth Pier, Rockingham County, New Hampshire. A merchant vessel once tied beneath the pier where lanterns bobbed like stars. A customs clerk in a blue coat kept lists of cargo and names, his handwriting formal and exact. A storm carried part of the pier away, and with it the clerk's ledger. His death is recorded as drowned, his final entries torn and blurred. Boaters recall a figure in period clothing walking the boards at low tide, pausing at the rope lines, hands folded as if tallying invisible manifests. Photographers claim to find salt spray on lenses where no water was present. The smell of pipe tobacco sometimes hangs for a moment and then is gone. Fishermen leave a coin on the pilings now and again. The coin will be there at dawn, moved but not lost. The pier still remembers names. SFX, Ocean Breath. 16. The Seamstress of Hollow Creek, Pike County, Kentucky. A small shop with a tilted sign once offered repairs and dresses sewn by a woman known in ledger entries as steady-handed and fixed by a precise needle. A fever swept the hollow and took customers in a season. The seamstress continued to mend for a time, her sign swinging in the wind, until the house fell silent. Locals who cross Hollow Creek at twilight report seeing curtains rearranged by invisible fingers and hearing the soft tap of a needle against a wooden block. Some find precisely folded handkerchiefs on their doorstep the morning after a funeral, as if someone kept the pattern of grief tidy. "She finishes what she starts," a neighbor murmured. The shop still stitches the edges of loss. Music, threads tick. 16. The Watchman's Lantern, Isle of Kettle, South Carolina. An island promontory once marked the limit of a ferry route. A watchman kept a lantern to warn small boats and record arrivals in a slim book. A sudden squall capsized one ferry, and the watchman's entries stop mid-sentence. Islanders tell of a lantern bobbing at the headland on nights when the tide turns hard, a light that waits for a ferry that will not come. Sound carries oddly across the marsh, voices mixed with gulls, the scratch of pen on paper, though no one sits at a desk. Boatmen sometimes feel a finger tap the side of the hull as if to confirm manifest lists. They look up to find only mist. The headland still notes each passing. SFX, Marsh Call. 18. The Silent Bell of St. Muir, Madison Parish, Louisiana. An old chapel once served a farming community. Its bell told births, deaths, warnings. The register kept names and dates in ink now browned by humidity. A late harvest season of hardship and a fever took many, and the bell cracked in the months that followed. Parishioners left it still, a fissured throat that would not ring, believing that silence might soothe some worn thing inside the wood. Yet neighbors near the chapel swear they hear a thin vibration some nights, a bell that chimes once and then retreats, as if testing a voice no longer whole. Photographs of the chapel at dusk sometimes show a faint glow beneath the bell tower where no bulb burns. The bell still listens for names. Music, brief bell. These places share a structure: a person who kept watch or records, an abrupt end recorded in ink, and a small repetition of the life that was interrupted. The phenomena are modest: light, sound, a misplaced object, a feeling that something has been counted and is still counting. Yet they press at the boundary between recorded fact and the ways communities grieve. People mend their routines around these spots. They cross earlier, they avoid certain lanes by night, they leave small things as remembrance. In doing so, they keep the memory alive without insisting on proof. There are other, quieter responses. Historians, archivists, and local custodians treat the traces respectfully, copying ledgers into safekeeping and photographing stones worn by names. Amateur photographers and late-shift truckers bring the stories into broader circulation. An image posted, a tale retold at a diner counter, and the places shift slightly under the weight of attention. That attention does not make the hauntings, it only keeps the conversation going, as if the living and the remembered were trading places for a few hours. If you travel to any of these sites, tread lightly, bring a light that does not disturb, speak softly, and remember that the stories belong first to those who lived and to those who were lost. Keep a respectful distance from fences and markers and consider the families who still tend anniversaries in quiet.
Some of the most convincing accounts come from those who are careful about what they claim, people who, when pressed, will say less than more, and who prefer to show a photograph than to insist on a conclusion. For now, the road goes on, bending through the counties and parishes where memory gathers itself into small acts: a coin left on a parapet, a lantern lit and left to sway, a ledger preserved on a shelf. There will be more places that collect the same curious attention: crossroads where numbers stop, storefronts where a seamstress never left her scissors, bridges that keep counting tolls in silence. Each site is a kind of map for grief and for the human desire to mark absence. We will follow that map further, tracing the quiet measures left in ink and stone and light. 19. The Counting Room at Willow and Gray, coastal New England. An old toll house stood where the road narrowed to cross the bridge. The proprietor kept a slate and chalk marking carriages and later cars by the hour. One autumn, the bridge was swept by an ice tide, and a ledger of small crossings was left half-wiped on the sill. Locals still say the slate gets busted each morning, though no hand touches it. Faint chalk marks appear on the inside of the window as if someone had been counting again and erased the numbers when finished. Fishermen who pass after dawn sometimes see the dust pattern of a palm and swear the tide is kinder afterward. Sound effects of wind on slate. 20. The Bench at Oldway Station, Wiltshire, England. A wooden bench on a rural platform bore the carved initials of a woman who came every week to meet a soldier who never returned. The station's timetable changed and trains ceased to stop. The bench was left under glass to preserve the initials, but rumor says someone still sits there at dusk. Drivers report that lights in the station building will flick in sequence, the arrangement the woman used to place her hat and scarf, though the building is empty and the glass is unbroken. A timetable clipped to the notice board sometimes shows an extra departure penciled in by a hand that will not claim it. 19. The Counting Room at Willow and Gray, coastal New England. An old coal house stood where the road narrowed to cross the bridge. The proprietor kept a slate and chalk marking carriages and later cars by the hour. One autumn, the bridge was swept by an ice tide, and a ledger of small crossings was left half-wiped on the sill. Locals still say the slate gets dusted each morning, though no hand touches it. Faint chalk marks appear on the inside of the window as if someone had been counting again and erased the numbers when finished. Fishermen who pass after dawn sometimes see the dust pattern of a palm and swear the tide is kinder afterward. Sound effects of wind on slate. 20. The Bench at Oldway Station, Wiltshire, England. A wooden bench on a rural platform bore the carved initials of a woman who came every week to meet a soldier who never returned. The station's timetable changed and trains ceased to stop. The bench was left under glass to preserve the initials, but rumor says someone still sits there at dusk.
Drivers report that lights in the station building will flick in sequence, the arrangement the woman used to place her hat and scarf, though the building is empty and the glass is unbroken. A timetable clipped to the notice board sometimes shows an extra departure penciled in by a hand that will not claim it. Music, distant train. 21. The seam at Marlowe Street, a tailor shop, Philadelphia. A tailor worked with such exactness, his client said his scissors could cut both fabric and time. He fell ill mid-sentence. A suit lay half-stitched on the frame, a lining pinned in a way no one could finish without spoiling the cut. People who pass the shop window on rainy days see the outline of a sleeve move, as if someone were pressing it for a final crease. Those who bring garments for repair sometimes find a thread already drawn taut and knotted, as if the tailor had begun the mend the night before. The shop's ledger keeps listing fittings in neat columns. Parties who collect their clothes discover, now and then, a note added in the margin, "Return Tuesday," though the shop has been closed for years. Sound effects of scissors click. 22. The Evening Ledger, Crescent Inn, Missouri.
In the small inn at the crossroads, an innkeeper recorded arrivals and departures with a careful hand. A late winter night, a fire took a wing of the house. The register survived, charred but legible. Entries after the fire show candles listed beside names, and one page names a single guest as waiting. Travelers who stop for the night report cups of tea left on the table they did not order, a pair of shoes warmed by an unseen hearth. The inn's bell, too big for the space, sometimes gives a soft ring at twilight, though no finger is known to pull it. The inn's mantel holds a pocket watch stopped at the hour the fire began. Sometimes it ticks for a minute at dusk and then falls silent again. Music, firelight brief. 23. The Unwound Clock, Rue des Marchands, a small French town. A watchmaker wound watches for sailors and seamstresses. He kept a scrapbook of watch faces he had repaired. When he did not come to the shop one morning, a glass display door stood open and watches lay in a ring as if arranged for a congregation. The town's children tell one another that if you stand in the square at noon and close your eyes, you can hear, faint beneath the midday chatter, the small, very regular sound of a mainspring unwinding and then relieving itself. Several people claim their stopped watches resume for a single minute at the same hour and then halt, as if a calculation were finished. The scrapbook is kept in the town hall with a penciled note, "Let the clocks rest." SFX, tiny tick. 24. The Orchard Registers, Valley Orchards, Pacific Northwest. Farmers kept tallies of trees and pickers and seasons, a ledger rubbed by rain, names of seasonal workers written in different hands across decades. A late frost took a season, and a counting name, M. Alvarez, was written and then crossed out with a haste that read like grief. Now, on certain mornings when mist sits low, the empty crates at the orchard gate hold a single fruit, perfectly formed, placed like an offering. Those who collect the fruit find a matching tally in the ledger, a number added in a handwriting not seen among the family for years. Fruit sellers on market day sometimes set aside an extra apple without remembering why. When they check the ledger, it is already noted. Music, orchard breath. These places, like the ones that came before, are small economies of attention. They measure absence in the only currencies they know: light that waits for an arrival, ink that stops mid-curve, a stitch left under a pen. They are not the loud cinematic hauntings of popular story, preferring to speak in the grammar of the quotidian. They insist on continuity, an accounting to be closed, a tally to be completed, a voice to be counted. The phenomena are almost domesticated. They do not break doors or overturn furniture. They leave margins and smudges. They alter the rhythm of a day. People respond by making rituals to match them. A widow leaves a weathered glove on the bridge where she used to meet her brother. A fisherman, having seen the lantern on the headland, keeps a candle alight in the wheelhouse on rough nights. A clerk copies entries from a brittle register into a new book with a hand that trembles. Sometimes the ritual is private and precise, folding a handkerchief into the pattern the seamstress preferred, and sometimes public, a small town choosing to toll once each year at dusk for those who will not be tallied again. The acts feel less like superstition and more like a social machinery, a way for communities to keep counting without insisting on the answer. There are other patterns as well. The items most often disturbed, lanterns, ledgers, bells, stitches, clocks, share something in common. They are devices for order. Each one is a tool to translate passing into record. When those tools click or glow or sound in the quiet hours, it is as if the world were testing its own accounting against a ledger that cannot be fully closed. Sometimes the phenomenon serves as a hinge between the living and those they have lost. In other cases, it is the last gesture of someone who could not finish the day's work. Either way, the result is plain and modest. People notice, someone tends, and a small space of attention, an altar of ordinary things, forms. Archivists and town clerks play a curious role in this landscape. Some regard their duties as purely practical, to copy a brittle page, to photograph an inscription, to move a ledger into climate control. Others treat the acts of preservation as an ethical response, a kind of stewardship. They will sometimes add a marginal note, an observation, a date, a question, softening the edges between record and myth. In a way, the archivist's hand becomes part of the story. An annotated margin can be the first stitch in a new ritual. Photographs taken at dusk and posted in clumsy, earnest forums spread these small occurrences beyond their counties, and the attention that follows reshapes places. A lane that once slept in obscurity becomes a path carefully lit by visitors who bring wrapping paper and polished coins. Attention is not the same thing as belief, but it is a force that moves practice. Not everyone honors that force gently. Curiosity can turn to commerce, and what was once an intimate tending can become a set piece for a weekend. There are tales, always whispered, of souvenir stands that sell replicas of a lantern's glass, of tabloids that take a smudge of light and turn it into a banner headline. That transmutation often changes the site, sometimes for the worse. Fences go up, signs read "Do not disturb," and rituals harden into tourist gestures. In other places, however, the commerce is small and local. An elder selling a book of copied entries at the harvest fair, proceeds going to the chapel's roof, and the attention helps keep roofs from falling. Traveling through counties with this map in hand is a kind of slow education in how humans keep faith with absence. It teaches a certain humility, that grief and memory often prefer not to be loud, that the world's strangeness is most often domestic, that care can be a ledger kept in pencil. The places point one toward a method of listening. Go at dusk, bring no bright light, speak the name if you must, but leave it at that, and, if you are the sort who writes, copy rather than interpret. Names matter. Not just the famous ones, but the small marks of presence. M. Alvarez, L. Hargreaves, Tuesday. These are not characters of legend, but coordinates of belonging. I close the folded map in my lap. The pages are thin from being opened and pressed at many corners. Outside the car, the road runs pale between hedgerows. A far church bell recognizes something in the hour and answers once. The next place on the list sits across county lines, down a lane that narrows toward a metal gate where a sign has long since been overgrown. I set the map next to a thermos.
check the light on my phone, though I do not mean to use it, and step out onto the ground with the same care that townspeople ask of visitors. The air tastes of iron and late grass. As I walk toward the marker, a low stone bearing a name and a date, someone in the distance calls the dog home. The call is a small, human sound that seems right in the place between leisure and living. I lower my head, read the inscription aloud the way a clerk reads a name for the first time into a new book, and then stand quietly, hands in my coat pockets, listening for whatever reply counts as sufficient.